words.
It's what are the words of Bill O'Reilly's act?
Well, fuck it, we'll do it live.
Have you seen that clip?
I think so.
What? No, I've not seen.
Wait, you don't know the clip?
Michael, you've never seen Bill O'Reilly say "fuck it, we'll do
wow.
it live"? Oh man, yeah.
Oh.
Homework.
Oh man.
This is like Bill O'Reilly.
Is this
like
something
Fox
that we
News
can
Bill O'Reilly?
we can bring up on the stream, or would we get copyright?
No, Bill O'Reilly would, like the ghost of Rupert Murdoch would probably take us out.
Okay, well I'll link you the video regardless.
Okay, thanks. Man, this is like a real like a syllabus getting
We're
up
getting
to
you caught
date
up
with these
on culture.
YouTube videos.
Yeah.
It was the very end of high school, and we got broadband internet at my house. And I had a friend who was like, "All right, I gotta catch you up with all the YouTube that you've missed," which at the time was,
What a statement.
So young.
what YouTube was in 2008.
You might want this longer version of the video. I don't know how much context is in the version I see.
You need
It says
the
37.
You do need context. It does add to it.
I think the context is something like his teleprompter stops working or something. And
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good one.
Off the cuff. Yeah.
It's whenever Bill O'Reilly finally leaves this earth, which will be a great day. It like that should lead his obit. Is
Someone needs to write a book called "Killing Bill O'Reilly" when he dies.
Whew.
Nice.
Get ready for your phone call from the FBI, Michael.
This is a line of books that he has about historical figures.
Oh, I'm aware. Yeah.
Okay.
I know you're not on Twitter, so you might not have been aware of this. But did Nadine ever tell you about her phone call from the FBI?
No shit.
Yeah. So,
Or something about
it was
Pelosi.
So she plays Killzone, which I think is a Call of Duty game. Is that right, Zach?
Yeah.
And then like there's like a sentence that plays in Killzone like at the beginning of every mission that's like, your mission is to kill blank. And apparently she was playing against somebody online whose name was Nancy Pelosi. And she tweeted, your mission is to kill Nancy Pelosi with like a screenshot or something. And the fucking FBI called her.
Holy shit.
Oh, hey, this is Steve from the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Are you planning to assassinate the Speaker of the House?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what is a phone call going to do to someone who's actually...
Okay, I'm going to need you to hold.
Not doing that.
I'm going to need you to hold then. If you could hold on the line, we'll patch you through to our manager.
Yeah, really.
Anyway, to all the government listening, we're not doing that. We're just talking about dumb movies together.
No, we're not doing that. We're going to talk about some stupid fucking movies.
We're just dumb people talking about dumb
some good
movies
ones
together.
I'm just talking about a stupid fucking movie.
Well, yeah.
Should we talk about some stupid fucking movies, you guys?
Let's do
I think
it.
we should.
That's what we should call this podcast. Is talking stupid fucking movies.
Stupid
I think
fucking bros
there's a
talking
lot
about
of those
stupid fucking
podcasts on
movies.
iTunes.
Young critics watch stupid fucking movies.
Stupid fucking young critics.
Stupid fucking young critics watch stupid fucking movies.
I can't wait for the podcast where we talk about old. So we can say young critics talk about old.
That'll be next week. That'll be the brief encounter episode.
Yeah.
She's gonna sit there. She's gonna sit there and just laugh.
Oh, I need to watch that.
Yeah, we're gonna watch it.
Oh boy.
It's just gonna be Jessy like on the background. She's like
Young
the whole time.
critics
She ain't even gonna talk about old. She's gonna be like, and then like we'll be like, Jessy, what'd you think of old? She'd be like, young critics watch old.
We're really we're spoiling this joke. People who've watched this are not gonna laugh next week.
Nobody was gonna laugh anyway. Nobody was gonna laugh.
We're live, but the podcast proper has
The podcast proper isn't started, but Ron will watch.
The listeners only won't see.
Ron will be like, laugh next week at
Hey, Ron.
LOL.
That's all. That's all I got. Hope you're doing well.
Jessy, not Jessica.
Yeah, I'm Jessy. I'm not the Asian one. I'm the white one. I'm the gay one.
I want a T-shirt, Cinematary, with Jessy, not the Asian one. Other one. All right, we'll do Michael and then the Swaffs.
I'm not suave. You guys don't understand.
Swalvas.
Suave.
Swalvas.
Swalva.
Swalva. Sounds like a
What's
like a
both change their last
disease.
names to
Like I went to
Swalva?
Central America
Yeah.
and I came back with Swalva.
It does.
Jeez.
That didn't hit with Michael. So all right, we'll go on then.
You know, you win some, you lose some. I laughed at the old one though. I laughed at Young Critics Watch Old.
Michael likes my humor better.
Is this thing on? All right, let's go. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. And welcome to episode 361 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Michael O'Malley.
Andrew Swafford.
Jesse Alva.
In today's episode, we'll be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we will be joined by special guest Jenny Olson to talk about 1931's Madkin in Uniform. So
I thought we decided it was Mädchen.
Mädchen.
Mädchen?
Nope. Literally, we address in the
Yeah, and we called it
in
Mädchen.
the second part. We just kind of go, it's something.
We went with Mädchen. I don't know where you were. I was there.
Mädchen. Madkin. Mädchen.
Madchen.
Madchen.
That's how I've always said it.
Madchen. Yeah, but that's not how
I
our
know it's
queer
wrong.
scholar said it.
That's
in
right.
part 2.
Yeah, I'll learn something. I haven't listened to it yet.
So stick around for that. But head over to Cinematary. We got reviews up. We got Jessica was on last week talking about Pig. So if you haven't seen Pig, we got that one there.
Man,
We
people
also
are
got-
loving the Pig. The reviews
People-
of Pig are glowing.
People are into Pig.
I thought it was pretty good.
didn't
I
like
wasn't
it.
that excited.
Andrew with the
I've-
hot take.
I feel like once every 5 years, there's a Nicolas Cage movie that comes out where everyone's like, "Oh yes, Nicolas Cage is a good actor," you know, and then people are kind of like forget, and he becomes like an object of cult fascination again. And this is like we're now like 5 years. It's like 10 years out from Joe. What was the movie 5 years ago? You know, whatever. It's
Oh,
Mandy.
Mandy.
Yeah, that was probably it. No, Joe. It was.
he was in a movie called Joe, wasn't he?
Yes,
He was in a
he
movie.
was. It was.
All right, we got a bunch of stuff
it
to talk about. We're killing time. Just go read the fucking review, guys.
Go
All
with
right.
Jessica's review of Pig.
Yeah, go read Jessica's review, Pig. All right, so this seems to be coming up on a weekly basis. So I think this is going to be the conclusion for those who are like serial listeners of the Fear Street series. So Andrew,
Oh, so are we ending the
you
podcast?
and whatever the hell that
This is
lady's
the
name is.
conclusion of the podcast.
This seems to be the conclusion of the podcast.
No, so we're going to talk about the last of the 3 Fear Street movies, which, as we've talked about for the last 2 weeks, have been dropping on Netflix 1 week at a time over the course of 3 weeks. I talked about the first installment 2 episodes ago. Jessica talked about the second installment last week.
The last one. Just put the last
Jess,
one.
you've been watching these with me, and you're a really big fan of them. So do you want to introduce the third one?
Sure.
Really
so the
big.
third. I liked him. The third Fear Street is set in, and I've got a fidget spinner. And Andrew keeps
It's
trying
just
to
gonna
take it
pick up
away
on the
from me.
microphone as
Just
well.
only a little. If you guys hear a weird little sound, it's my fidget spinner. I have undiagnosed
Professional
ADD,
show
possibly.
business.
Anyway, so the third Fear Street movie kicks us off in what
1666.
1666 in what I think they call it Union in the show, but it's what's going to be future one day Shady Side, I suppose. And or Sunnyvale, I don't know, it doesn't really say where they are. But anyway, and we are finally going to get the story of Sarah Fear, who's like the titular or like the witch character that they're always talking about. And we're going to getting her story of what this curse is with the hand and all that. And you end up finding out that she's really not even guilty at all. But she is.
Wait,
kinda-
should we spoil? How
Well,
much
it's
should we
done now.
say? How much should we say?
It's done now.
There's something in the second.
There's a hand, and
of
she's
this movie.
innocent. That's all I need to know.
Once this movie hits the second half point, it took a turn that I really was not expecting, and I hesitate
I'm
to
just
say
gonna
anything.
say she's not a nasty evil witch like everybody
Sure.
cracks her. Like
Okay.
at the legend tells that she's just this like, evil nasty witch who's put this evil curse on this
Right.
evil town. Blah blah. Blah. Like
The
you
twist
end up-
would be that she actually is, because I feel like that's always the case.
yeah, like right.
Yeah, I was about to say, what's the last movie with like just like a
Yeah.
purely evil?
Oh,
They
witch?
should have
we
just
should
been
that.
like, "Oh no, she sucks."
Yeah.
The witch.
Which has always got some good reasons.
Aunt
That's
Gretel
true.
and
behind,
Hansel.
right? I think like no
True.
villain is ever just like pure
Shut up,
evil
Andy.
for evil's sake. They've always got some kind of motivation. So we end up finding out that she is not actually as evil as the legend says she is. And
Get the
gosh,
mic.
it is kind of hard to talk about without spoiling it because it
Mhm.
does have like a pretty big honkin' whopping twist to it.
Yeah.
But I guess just to talk about the movie
Friends
for a
along the
second,
way.
there's a whole lot that I really liked. This is probably my favorite of the three. There's a lot I really liked about it. I liked just kind of seeing how they did the period of creating this time. Each one of the movies is kind of set in a time period, so I'm sure like a lot of work had to go into building sets and costumes and stuff to really make it feel real. But this one, you know, is certainly the most jarring of the three since it's set in such a very different time period from our own. They have like a whole village that they've built. Everybody's got very, very unique period appropriate costumes. They all speak differently and have period appropriate like what would you call it? Speech syntax. I don't know. Yeah. So it's kind of cool to see this franchise shift so starkly in comparison to the other two. That itself was fun, but I also really liked that this, like all the other two, or I guess like the first one, includes a female and female like lesbian romance. I'm always really curious. I always really like to see movies like about queer stories, and it's always interesting to see that in like a period context to see you know how things would have played out in that kind of time. The answer is bad because queer people don't have a lot of really great stories to tell when you go back further than like now. But
We just
it's
talked
just-
about match like in the second part of this episode.
That's
we
true.
cover
right,
queer
true.
story.
right, and that actually does kind of have. It's not
Just stole the
happy,
thunder
but
of this.
you know,
The context is then the Nazis took over.
right.
So-
Yeah, but that affected
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
That was an everybody thing.
Yeah.
So like that, I
Yeah.
really enjoyed getting to see that, and I think I feel like I've seen other discourse talking about that as well.
Mhm.
So I thought just like it is a very kind of a creative premise, and I like stories kind of set in that old England like witching era. I feel like we just don't really see a lot of that. Like I loved the
The
witch.
witching era.
The you know the like oh it's you know. I don't
Is
know.
it old
Yeah,
England?
the
or
era
is
the
it-
era of the Salem witch trials.
I like
Yeah.
that kind of
Oh,
stuff.
okay.
We just don't
Is it
have a lot-
America?
It's America.
It's America. I don't know if we ever get what state
I know
these movies
we
are
were
set in.
debating about it.
I'm sure that R.L. Stein, he set his book series in an actual. I don't know what it is.
I like to see that done well. That era specifically, I think it's really interesting in American history. I really like The Witch. I even really like The Crucible, even though it's you know a little different. So that element of it I really liked. But then after a certain point in the movie, we go back to the 90s.
That was the thing I was worried about spoiling, but
I think that's not even a spoiler because the whole thing is a frame story.
Yeah.
Like the first movie is the 90s. The second movie is framed around the 90s.
Yeah.
And this last movie is still framed around the 90s. So I don't feel like that's a spoiler at all.
I guess the thing that really took me for a loop was like halfway through the movie, you get another title card,
Right.
and it says Fear Street Part 4.
So you didn't have
I was
to
like,
reveal
oh
that.
wow, okay.
You could have just said that the movie ends
Yeah.
up back in the 90s because
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
where the frame is. I don't think
Mhm.
that's a spoiler.
Sure,
Because the whole
okay.
movies have been within a frame.
Mhm.
So we end up going back to the 90s. You're silly. And there's a really, really neat kind of like monster slash scene in that 90s era that I thought played out just so cool. And I'm going to have a hard time describing it. But basically, they're in the mall that they're in the first movie. And the mall is like weirdly lit with like glow in the dark lighting and stuff.
What do you say, Sam?
I'm never gonna watch these movies now. I feel like I'm just getting the whole between you and
Why?
Jessica, man. Like you might as well just give me the Wikipedia page.
I mean, I can
Christ.
stop. You can just
No,
have it
no,
every
no.
time.
We're in the mall. We're in the mall from the first
Good.
movie.
I just thought that it was really interesting how they used the sets to play up this like final scene.
It looks like you're inside like a laser tag
Yeah,
arena or
they
something.
used. I mean, like they could just have people like slash each other in the woods. They do that, and it's really hard to see because it's just not really good cinematography. And there's a lot of that issues going on throughout the series. But
Right.
they play out this scene in such a kind of visually creative way, where they kind of have this like final showdown with all these monsters. But they use a lot of like glow. Lighting
Sticks.
and paint and blood to really make the scene just look so cool.
Wait, the blood is glowing?
Glow blood.
Yeah, they mix blood with like water and glow paint and like spray it everywhere to kind of lure these monsters in because the monsters.
Oh, I thought like as people were dying, the blood coming out of them was
that would
glowing.
be cool. But there is
That's
a part
part
where
of
like
the
somebody
LGBTQ
touches somebody
blood.
else, but they've got like the glow blood on them, so then there's glow blood on this other person too.
Yeah.
So just visually, I thought that was really fun and really cool that they did that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought this is my favorite of the three. The
Mhm.
second one was my second favorite, and the first was my least favorite. But as a whole, I think they're kind of best when you look at kind of the whole set versus like
Yeah.
an individual. I think it's a fun series, and I'm glad that they got put out.
I mean, they were obviously like planned and created as one full package. It would be weird if we were getting these movies with like a year or so in between the releases of them because it all just feels so like immediately connected to one another. I'm not nearly as high on this one as you are, though I still would say I prefer it to the first movie. I think the second one is the strongest. It's the one that works the best as a standalone movie, even though none of them are really meant to act as a standalone movie. You mentioned the visual disparity between the first half set in the 1600s and the second half set in the 1990s. And how it was really hard to see in the 1600 section. And that was the thing that I kind of forgot to mention when I talked about the first movie 2 weeks ago, that in the darker scenes of these movies, I found it really hard to just tell what was going on. And I don't think that was me or my TV or the time of day we were watching it. I think it's just like the cinematography and maybe specifically like the Netflix mandated cinematography or whatever. It just all gets really murky and gray. And in the 1600s, when like they're trying to make it look like it's all natural light, that is amplified. And basically for the first half of the movie, you know, it's a coin flip whether or not I can see what's happening on screen.
There's a lot of darker scenes for sure.
Yeah.
Scenes like kind of running in the woods at night and like in caves and stuff.
When you compare it to something like The Witch,
should have had the glow blood.
They should have had the glow blood.
If only
but I think The Witch was shot with natural light, if I'm remembering correctly. And you can see everything really well in that.
Yeah.
Just like they had a better cinematographer. They had better methods of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, that's also like
wasn't
art cinema
Netflix.
versus Netflix.
Right. It wasn't Netflix. I would also say that I had a hard time like suspending my disbelief a little bit in the first half of the film in the 1600s period setting. Like I don't think the production design does nearly enough to convince me that I'm there. And also there's kind of this narrative conceit that one of the characters from the 90s movie is kind of seeing themselves in the 1600s, and they're kind of like projecting the faces of people they know onto these other characters. So these are not what these people actually looked like, but this is kind of like the dream composite version of the 1600s. Kind of like we were talking about Zelda earlier. It reminds me of Majora's Mask and how like all the characters from Ocarina of Time, their faces and bodies get reused for like different characters in Majora's Mask. And that's cool. It's really interesting, but it added another layer of like me not being able to believe the reality that I was looking at, right? Which maybe that's an interesting effect. I found it maybe hard to like get invested in the stories of these people because they didn't feel like real people to me. Once it pivots back to the 90s and the thing comes full circle, I think it's really, really strong. I was talking when we talked about the first movie, that like I wasn't sure if I trusted where the direction the movie was going thematically, like how it was going to deal with all these issues of like cyclic violence and cyclic poverty and things like that. And I think with the third movie, it absolutely nails it. Like I wasn't expecting it to go quite as hard as it did with like making all of those connections, and it just like totally clicks. It really works.
There's a cool reveal.
Very cool reveal. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the Fear Street project is undoubtedly going to be like one of my favorite things I've watched this year. It's not like the most technically proficient movie in the world or movies in the world. It's not, some of the best horror cinema has to offer or anything. But it's really fun and it's really neat. It's really unique. And I really enjoyed watching all three of these movies.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah.
I really enjoyed hearing very in-depth descriptions of all three of them. So
You should watch them.
They're good. Why
They're
not?
good.
I don't feel like I have to now.
Oh, you should. I don't know if you'd like them. I
No,
mean, I really don't know, but it's definitely kind of along the lines of like, it definitely has a Netflix feel to it. Kind of along the lines of something like
Kissing
Stranger
Booth.
Things, or I watched a show recently called Trinkets. It's got this like teeny Netflix feel of that's really grounded in our current era of television. So your mileage on that?
Who are you
kind of
talking
varies,
to?
I think. I'm just sort of looking at the lights.
She's opining.
We've got cool lights going on. You can't see them. They stop. Oh, see? Yeah.
I mean, Jesse, I get it, but like,
This is an audio medium, people.
it's just it's
So
like
describe it like you
thing.
did the mall scene.
That's right.
All right. Well, Fear Street 1, 2, and 3, and I guess 4 too.
There's no
Are
The
on
Secret Fear Street 4.
whatever.
yeah, are on
Nobody
Netflix.
It's like
Fear
is
Street
it like a
4.
post-credits secret?
Yeah.
It's like Fear Street 1990, whatever, part 2, and you're like, whoa, crazy! I didn't expect that all twist.
Well, those are on Netflix. Let's kick it over to Hulu. We got a movie that premiered earlier this year on demand
Barb and
and has
Star.
now made its way to old Hulu. I don't know who's watched this, so I'm just gonna put it on the screen and somebody take off.
Lewis watched this.
Me and Jess and Michael have also all watched this. Barb and Star go
Barb
to
and Star.
Vista Del Mar. Do you want to say it in their voice?
I don't think I could.
So if we have
Barb and
listeners from
Star.
Nebraska, if we have
Are they
listeners
from
from Nebraska,
Nebraska?
just
Or more like
imagine.
Minnesota.
Okay.
Barb and Star.
They're actually from
Del
Nebraska.
Mar.
Okay. Well, so this movie stars Kristen Wiig and Annie Mumolo. I recognize her face. I guess she's in Bridesmaids and a bunch of other
She
stuff,
wrote
right?
Bridesmaids.
She wrote Bridesmaids along with Kristen Wiig, right?
Yes.
And she and Kristen Wiig wrote this together as well. And it shows like they're having a lot of fun. This clearly is like a passion project of sorts for them. And they are playing these two like middle-aged churchy ladies from Nebraska who like they just absolutely nail a very specific type of middle-aged woman who I've like encountered hundreds of times in my life, but I've like maybe never seen on screen ever.
Hundreds feels like a really high.
No, hundreds is a low
Feels-
estimate
that
of
feels
how many
dramatic.
of these kinds of women I've run into in my life. But the story here is that these two women, they work in like a furniture store. They've been friends forever.
They work in a furniture.
They quote
store.
unquote work in a furniture store. They really just jab to each other in a furniture store. And half of the comedy of this movie is just kind of like watching their endless like yes and back and forth, which sounds, I mean, if I was hearing that, knowing like, Bridesmaids and all these other like Paul Feig movies, I would be a little wary because a lot of those movies, they kind of have a problem of like being overstuffed with improv. There'll be scenes that are written and they have like a plot purpose, but then like you can feel the gears grinding when they switch into improv mode. And you can just tell that every actor or actress was kind of told to like come up with a clever riff on this premise. And they just like go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But like that dynamic is kind of the central dynamic in Barb and Star. And most of the time it's really funny. Like it goes to some absurd, like almost surreal places. Anyways, the actual conflict here is they decide they want to go on a vacation together because they live a boring, ordinary life. They get laid off from their job. They go to this crazy talking club where they are they are no longer they feel uncomfortable in the talking club because of them losing their
It's like imagine a book club, but instead of reading books together, you just have like pre-written conversation topics that you have to
Yeah,
stick to.
who would get together with friends on a weekly basis to have pre-planned conversations?
And
I
you
mean,
can't-
who would do that?
The conversation
Pause
topics
for
are
a
things
sec.
Sounds like a
like
podcast.
soup and
Yeah.
like mittens and stuff. They're not even like
Wicker. Yeah, things like that.
wicker. That's right.
You're not allowed to stray, and you're not allowed to lie.
Right. Anyway,
Strange.
it's very funny. They go on vacation. They both jointly fall in love with oh gosh, I'm forgetting his name right now. The guy who plays Christian Grey,
Jamie Dornan.
Jamie
Yeah.
Dornan, who
Yeah.
is so
I'm
freaking
fucking
good.
here, man.
Like immediately after it was over, we decided to rewatch 50 Shades of Grey.
I was to see him actually in a sexy role. I
Yeah.
just want to see more of this man, but also less.
Yeah, he has
Close.
multiple musical numbers. This movie is really wild, like way more wild than I think a studio comedy has been in a while. Like it is very daring. It takes risks. Not all of those risks pay off. But there is just a general like off the wall wacky energy to this movie that had me laughing out loud for like half of the runtime and had me just like not sure what to do with it for the other half of the
I
runtime.
did a lot of like just have my mouth open. Like, oh, they're doing that. Okay.
Yeah,
Like, there's a lounge singer who every time they go to his character,
Richard Cheese in
Yeah.
this movie. Yeah.
and every time they go to his character, like anytime they're in like scene drinking and they're in the lounge or whatever, he's playing music. It's always about boobs. He's like, boobies! Playing it like it's a real jazz song or
Yes.
something.
And Michael, I know that you're a big fan of this movie. We were talking at one point about like what are the best movies of 2021, and you were in retrospect like, honestly, maybe Barb and Star.
Yeah.
What's your feeling about it now?
I think it's super fun and funny. And as time has gone on, I saw this a month or two ago. And as time has gone on, I don't remember the parts that didn't work.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they're there, but what I remember most is like just it's just really, really funny. And like, it has this like comedy wavelength that I love that like, I mean, you were mentioning like Bridesmaids and like, the kind of Judd Apatow style. And like the one thing, I like a lot of those movies, but the one thing that like those movies are doing is that it's trying to be naturalistic and quote unquote realistic, right? Like that's kind of like why the improv is there, is to make it seem like it's just people like shooting the shit. And these are real dudes or real ladies that you can relate to because your friends do that. And like one of the things that those movies,
people.
Yeah, exactly. Your friends.
Yeah.
But one
They
of
all
those
go to
things those
UCB.
movies don't capture, which I love in movie comedies and TV comedies also, is just this like impulse to go with strange ideas and just commit to them. And this movie does that just all the time. And it feels a lot like the Abrams and Zucker like movies, those sorts of like anything goes sorts of things, like Airplane, where it's just like, you know what, we thought it would be funny if we had this one scene where this there's a talking crab and he bestows wisdom in the voice of Morgan Freeman, and that's it. There's nothing related to anything. Like it's a lot of things like that where it's just like almost like whims, like writer room whims that I think like.
But it's
a lot
also
of
like so written too. Like there are great little narrative arcs peppered throughout this movie that makes it feel so like well planned, despite how loose it all feels too.
It feels a lot like the kind of dominant studio comedy that was ascendant right before Judd Apatow stuff, which is like the Austin Powers and like Zoolander and those sorts of movies that have like a really tight plot in which they throw really goofy characters that they can give kind of like goofy bits to inside of that plot. And I think it really works. And like Andrew said, like I'm sure there are things that don't work, but the density of attempts, like the density of jokes, and the fact that most of the jokes don't actually last very long means that like no one joke like sinks the movie. Whereas like if you think about some of these improv movies, like the Judd Apatow movies, like a single riff can go on and like derail a scene. Like there's that scene in Bridesmaids which like is it's supposed to be bad, like with the toast, where they keep like extending the toast,
Yeah.
for like
That's
forever
an
and ever.
improv
You know,
scene. Yeah.
that's an improv scene, and the point is that it goes on forever. But
Yeah.
like, it also means that you're watching it forever, and it ceases to be funny to me. And this movie doesn't have that. It's
I slightly disagree. I think the
Okay,
part of this
all right.
movie they commit really hard to that doesn't ever really work is Kristen Wiig's second role, where she's
Oh,
playing
no.
the like spy villain antagonist character. I don't think
Spoilers.
those scenes work at all. Really,
No,
I
those.
like Jamie Dornan's connection to her, because Jamie Dornan is playing like this henchman who has fallen in love with the villainess that he's working for. She doesn't love him, and he's like desperate for her, and it's really funny. But like, I don't think that character on her own is funny essentially ever.
I disagree. She has one of my favorite lines in the movie, which is she's instructing her henchman to drive a submarine, and she's like, "And make sure you don't drive straight. Make sure you go left and right, really."
That is very good. Yes.
Like, if you're just listening to the podcast, you can't see, but imagine like how characters drive things in movies where they're constantly moving the wheel.
Yes.
And she basically like verbally instructs the character to do that, and it is
Right.
like honestly probably the hardest I laughed in that movie.
I thought the dynamic between Barb and Star is so funny.
Yeah.
Just how much they are very in tune with each other's wavelengths and like
Yeah.
nobody else. I love the scene where they're flying out to Vista Del Mar, and
Talking about Trish.
Trish.
and they like they're just talking about whatever on their plane. They're the like loud talkers that you just wish could just get the hint that you need to talk just a little bit quieter. We encountered these people today at lunch, like people who just talked a little too loud, and it's like, this person's sitting right next to you, man. You could just bring it down about 5 decibels here. But it just go on and on. And eventually think about like an imaginary person named Trish, who is
They're talking about what their favorite name is.
Yes.
Like Kristen Wiig, I think, reveals that her favorite name is Trish, and the other one's like, "Oh yeah, that's my favorite name too." And they start like imagining this hypothetical Trish. Like, here's what the Trish in my head is like. They're kind of
Yes.
forming this headcanon of this
and
character named Trish.
they create this like
Yeah.
perfect imaginary person named Trish and just assume all of her values and all the things she does and her tragic like death in life and stuff like that.
And it's just like Michael was saying with the toast scene from Bridesmaids, where the joke is that it keeps going on forever,
Yes.
but the difference is this joke is actually funny. And
It goes on and on forever, but it's so funny just to like they start talking about it for about 5 minutes on the plane, and people around them are like, "Oh wow, these people can really go on it." And they talk about it the entire plane ride, and it just like there's several cuts to people on the plane just gradually going like, "Oh fucking!"
And it
somebody
has
please
the
kill me. Let
best
this plane
payoff of
crash.
any joke in the
Yes.
movie, but I will not spoil that.
They like even as they get off the plane and they're riding an escalator, they're both continuing to think about Trish and like crying because they're finally writing the end of the Trish story, like how she
Yeah.
dies, and they're like sobbing, and people around them are like, "What the fuck is going on?" It's just very good.
It's a good movie.
That part of it.
Yeah, it's good.
I don't know
It's super
what-
breezy.
Zach, I thought of you specifically. I think that you will enjoy this movie a lot. You should watch it.
It's a movie that feels out of time. Like it's the sort of movie that like doesn't feel like is in tune with any sort of like trends or anything, at all.
I said
So
in my
it's
letterbox review,
delightful.
it is a new type of guy.
It's it was I don't know that I liked it as much as Andrew and Michael did. For me, it's very much this was pretty dumb, but I did like it. It's that's what I give a 2.5-star movie. It's like, this is pretty fucking stupid, but it's good too. It's fun.
Jesse's like talking it up the whole time. Then 2.5 stars.
Yeah, 2.5 stars. It was a piece of shit.
You
Man,
guys did all
I
the
enjoyed
talking.
that.
You guys did all the talking. I talked about the things I specifically did think were very fun about it, though. So.
All right. Well, Barb and Star Go to Vista
Barb and
Del
Star.
Mar. It's a piece of shit, according to Jessy. It is on Hulu.
It's Gooby.
It's
Gooby.
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 This is the word. You gotta
That's
learn.
all. That's also I'm sure, a streaming service where you can probably find it.
There's
Um,
Mubi, there's Tubi, there's Gooby. You know.
There's Gooby.
The
Here
new
till
Three
Thursday,
Stooges.
people.
What else is on Gooby, Jess?
I don't know.
These are those. I'm one of those improv, friends that you're talking about. I'm just
Yeah.
making stuff up.
I feel
off
like
the
I'm
cuff.
in a Judd Apatow movie. This is cut from Knocked Up or whatever.
I'm trying to do like Seth Rogen, like ha ha ha
Right.
ha 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 yeah. All right.
Zach,
Wow.
are you going to give us a little
Uncanny.
just the tip teaser of Space Jam?
Got to be a better way to say that.
Speaking of movies that are outside of
No, instead, speaking of movies that really speak to how I feel, let's talk about the Empty Man on HBO.
So good.
Okay, well, we watched this week too. We've been catching up on new releases, but I feel like I've been talking a lot. Michael, do you want to introduce
Yeah,
The
let
Empty
Michael do
Man?
that.
This is another of your favorites of the year, I believe.
Sure, I have.
Or I guess
liked
it was
this
last
movie.
year, technically.
Well, the release of this is
All
really
years.
complicated because this movie was filmed in 2017, but then was basically in not even development hell. It was done, but because of the Fox Disney merger, it was like in limbo for a long, long time until it finally was released. When was it actually released? Last year. So in the middle of the pandemic, it had a very limited theatrical run, and then like I think most people didn't catch up with it until like its home video release, which was I think this spring. And it is a horror movie.
I should also want to interject and say I'm pretty sure that the people catching up with it on home video and it kind of getting this cult following can trace its roots back to Cinematary's Nadine Smith. I think that she tweeted about The Empty Man so much that a lot of like more influential people started watching and tweeting about The Empty Man, and now it's a big deal.
She's patient zero.
He's patient zero for The Empty Man.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. Well, to bring things
She'll
back full
correct me
circle.
if I'm wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we can, as a podcast, collectively just own that for now.
I'm sure she's gonna be like, no, I didn't start a trend. I'm just a person.
So at any rate, this is a horror movie, like a thriller horror movie that is really difficult to explain the plot of because the plot is wild. It kind of starts in one place. In fact, there's a whole prologue. This is a really long movie. This is like 2.5 hours or something. Yeah, 2 hours and 17 minutes. And the movie begins with like a prologue that essentially establishes this concept of this like basically I don't. It's like a person gets cursed and they're in Tibet or something. Oh, sorry, Bhutan. They get cursed, and so there's like this curse, and like the plot of the prologue has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. It is just like thematically and atmospherically setting up the real movie. And so in this prologue, you see this person get cursed and essentially like become like cease to be conscious, and not like that they're dead, but like
Cursed
their personality.
Is a weird word for it. It's like they lose their own will or something.
Yeah, like their identity goes away, like their sense of self disappears until they just become like a hollow.
They're making
vessel.
The movie makes a lot of parallels to Buddhism. Like the character who loses their consciousness does so while kind of sitting in the like meditation pose, and we also see some monks pass by while they're like on their way up the mountain, and I think that like that's the sort of spiritual milieu that the movie is working with. A lot of Western horror movies tend to like use Christian like symbology and iconography and stuff, and this is kind of dealing with a different palette, I guess.
Right. So the main plot of the movie then kickstarts after this prologue, in which you have like this this detective who's in like Middle America somewhere. I don't know where this is supposed to take place. But he begins to investigate this missing persons case, and he keeps finding like messages and clues that are about the empty man, like the empty man made me do it, and things like that. And so he starts pulling at these threads of like, what is this? What is the empty man? And he kind of uncovers this like vast conspiracy and cult surrounding this concept of the empty man, which he doesn't really understand. And at the same time, he himself seems to be having like some sort of like identity crisis or like perhaps mental breakdown, but also perhaps like something is happening to him.
Nadine's other podcast, Hot Box of Cinema, did an episode that I actually have not listened to. Apologies, Nadine. Called it was about mind virus films, and so an example of a mind virus film would be like The Bye Bye Man. You know, if you when you think about The Bye Bye Man, that's when The Bye Bye Man gets you. And there's also like
the game.
Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Cure is a great example of a mind virus movie. And in The Empty Man is very much the same situation where like as the character begins to investigate this phenomena, he becomes kind of like overtaken by the phenomena. There's the Nietzsche line that actually in the movie an important scene, like when you gaze the abyss gazes back at you. The movie's kind of dealing with that idea.
Yeah, and it's kind of like. So, like, that's, like, the kind of structure that the movie takes, but, like, that's not really what's special about the movie to me. Like, first of all, like, it's, like, how that unfolds, and it's really deeply unsettling at parts. Like, especially some of the stuff with the cult. There's this one scene in particular in which he's sneaking up to, like, this, like, ritual being performed by the cult. That is like really, really deeply unnerving.
Oh, you're talking about the one at the campsite or the campground?
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's one of the most horrifying like horror images I've seen in a while. Yeah.
So like a lot of the movie is like this guy going through like a procedural, like it's almost like Zodiac, and in fact the director used to work with David Fincher.
Yeah, so, all of his work prior to this have been like behind the scenes documentaries for David Fincher movies, which is really interesting.
Right. And so like there's a lot of like the same sort of stylistic stuff that David Fincher will use, like the really like clean digital cinematography and things like that. And in fact, like I mentioned, like it has kind of like parallels to like the kinds of things that David Fincher likes to focus on, like a lot of procedure and a lot of like, you know, people like obsessively like poring over like certain things. So like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo or Zodiac or something. And so it kind of has that structure to it. While at the same time, you feel like that, unlike in some of these other, you know, more standard movies, like the film itself is kind of unraveling as it goes. And some of this may be accidental given like the really rocky production of the movie. Like maybe some of these loose ends are not meant to be loose ends that are, but like the overall effect of it, I think is like really interesting, where you see, you know, this kind of like implosion of like the central character at the same point that the movie starts to feel really like fuzzy around the edges, in really interesting ways. And it's also just scary on like a really visceral level. It reminds me a lot of, and I said that I was going to do this on the Slack for Cinematary. I'm just going to go ahead. It reminds me a lot of Gravity's Rainbow, which I've been reading this summer, in the sense of like, so like the plot of Gravity's Rainbow focuses on this guy named Tyrone Slothrop. And during World War II, he is like just an American GI, and he eventually like runs away from the army and is like going around Europe. And basically what he discovers is that like, basically that all these nation states are in collaboration with one another because of like capital interests, you know, like, so like arms dealers are dealing to both like the Axis and Allied forces and like whatever. But he also discovers that he himself has been like conditioned by the like these giant conspiratorial organizations to be a certain way. And it's like this whole like investigation of like, you know, in a world in which like market forces and governments and like, you know, these large organizations have increasing surveillance and control over people, what does identity mean? You know, if you say, you know, I like Coke or oh wow, The Shining is my favorite movie or whatever, you know, how much of that is you as a person, like something about yourself, and how much of that is you have been conditioned by these really larger forces to kind of fall into that. And The Empty Man is kind of like that. It's not really about like market forces, but it is also like this investigation of like this guy as he finds himself more and more tied up in this larger conspiracy. To what extent does that call into question whether or not he is actually like who he thinks that he is, and like his identity, like does your identity exist if there are forces that help craft that identity.
And I think the forces that the movie has in mind would not be like socio-political forces, but more like religious ones, like the idea of fate or destiny or some sort of creator that you have some sort of a relationship with. The movie, more than about anything I can think of, like really asks you like to examine how the idea of religion, just like full stop, is kind of horrifying. Like the idea of like there being this veil that humans could pierce through and like see this larger cosmology is just like a horrifying idea to think about if you think about it long enough. Like this movie, and Jesse's tired of me making this comparison, but like this movie and the video game Bloodborne are like the only things that I can think of that like make religion as horrifying as they do.
Well, in a lot of religions, unless you're talking about new religious movements, most religions come like prior to the kind of modern Western concept of the self. And so a lot of movements, like religious movements and religious theologies or, ideas, really focus a lot on like either negation of the self or transformation of the self through like collective communal means. I think that this movie, like Andrew said, is really great at showing like how horrifying that can be. If you become like enmeshed in a religious movement and your entire identity becomes subsumed by this religious movement, like to the point where your personality is not quite recognizable to the people outside of that. That can be a really scary idea. If like, I guess it can be
you don't
really
have a firm enough grasp on, who you are deep down.
Yeah,
Jesse,
exactly.
Let's get you in this conversation. You had kind of an existential crisis watching The Empty Man, right?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, what are your basic thoughts on it?
Gosh, well, there's a lot that I really liked. There's a lot that I found really effective about the movie. I really liked the first sequence of it a lot, and I was kind of sad that we just sort of got it. What are you laughing at, Zach?
I like the first part. I just liked it.
I just thought
well,
it was
Michael
neat.
talked about the prologue. It's a good prologue.
I just thought it was neat. No, I thought it was very effective.
Marge Simpson. I just think they're neat.
It was neat. I thought it was a good start. I really liked the way that they kind of set up this guy, accidentally stumbles into this evil monk cave. I don't know. And so there's like a lot of mystery shrouded in it, like what's going on, what he tapped into. And then his little like weird little
oh yeah, there's like this ASMR scare thing that they do.
He does a lot of like that little muttering, and it just like something about it just makes you feel like, I don't know, you got like an eel climbing up your body or something, like makes you feel like squeezed out and yucky.
I tried to show Jessy some ASMR stuff unrelated to The Empty Man, and she couldn't find any way into it because she was just thinking of The Empty Man the whole time.
Was I? I don't think that was the reason I wasn't into it, but we can talk about that off camera. Anyway, so there's, I don't know, the first bit of it I think was just so effectively like spooky. And then I just feel like it dropped a little bit for me. I liked both of what they were doing. The cult thing that was going on was really creepy and feeling like increasingly helpless and trapped. It reminded me a lot of Eyes Wide Shut.
Eyes Wide Shut.
Oh yeah.
In
I can
this,
see that.
like as he continues to hunt for answers, he's getting met with strange results and violence and getting roped into something that he really didn't mean to get roped into. But and then the urban legend bits of it was also interesting. I just didn't feel like they did a good job really connecting the two at all. Like on the one hand, it's this religion, and the other hand, like if you're not the right kind of believer or whatever, it's going to make you kill yourself or something.
And we also weren't quite sure like how the rules of the movie worked. It seemed like the rules that the prologue was operating on, the rules that the what was the phrase you used, the urban legend section of the movie was operating on, and the rules that the occult part was working on. All the Empty Man kind of functions differently in all three of those parts of the movie, but According to Nadine, the director is like really detail oriented about stuff like that. So there probably is a logic to it that I just haven't quite cracked yet.
Yeah.
There probably is, but also like if you think about like, I mean, if you're pushing the like religious ideas of it, like those are three different like contexts in which there's a religious figure, right? And so like, you know, it's pretty frequent that like in, you know, a given umbrella of a religion, like a figure can act differently or mean different things depending on like who is using that imagery or that idea.
And I can see that kind of in a more real world framework, but I guess in a very short, in a contained story, in a contained platform like a movie, I don't really see that working as well, at least for me, right?
Yeah, like I said, like there's a lot of like loose ends that I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Meant to be loose
there's
ends.
a lot. It's hard for me. I guess it's been like a week or two now since we watched it. There's a lot for me that worked really well. Just interesting ways of setting up using the sound, like when the guy goes in the cave and you hear this like gurgling horror music. I thought that was just so effectively used. But then there's a lot that just sort of I didn't really understand, and I couldn't tell if it was just me being dumb or the movie. I don't know.
Part of me thinks that if there was nothing you didn't understand, then like a cosmic horror movie like this maybe wouldn't be functioning properly, right? There has to be some element of the unknown or the unknowable at work in a story like that. But I definitely also feel like the desire to like have it make just a little more sense than it does at times.
But I mean, I think it's interesting. Maybe I would be interested in revisiting it again at some point. But
definitely one of the more interesting movies of the past year, and I think that even just talking about it has the it's hard not to make it sound more ordinary than it actually is. Like this is a deeply weird movie, and a pretty fucked up movie too.
Yeah, it's one of those movies. I guess I would compare it a little bit to The Glitch in the Matrix that we watched a few months ago. That if you really sit and tap into that headspace for too long, you're gonna get into a bad place.
Yes, this is what I was alluding to earlier.
So is this kind of one of those proceed with caution things?
Yeah.
We ended up watching a couple of videos on YouTube afterwards, just kind of meditating a little further on the idea of simulation theory, because it's one of those things that I want to also say off topic, A Glitch in the Matrix I thought was an excellent movie, but also I almost wish I hadn't seen it because I think it's kind of done some permanent psych damage to me.
We went and watched Thought Slime's video about why simulation theory is bullshit, which I would recommend if anybody is dealing with that, internal struggle.
This isn't that exactly, but I think it does open up like kind of some interesting and possibly harmful like trails of thought.
It's the spiritual version of the scientific stuff that simulation theory is working with.
So with movies like this, and like definitely with movies like Glitch in the Matrix, and you proceed with caution.
Yeah.
Know your brain well enough to know whether or not it's a good idea for you to play with those thoughts.
The mind virus will get you.
Yeah, and I feel a little not great about some of that. So it's okay though.
One last thing I'll say about this movie that's on a completely different topic, but this is the last officially released movie that has the old 20th Century Fox logo at the beginning. Everything else is now the Disney-fied one. So if you want that piece of history, it's forever encased in amber here in this movie.
Is Fox Space Jam, or is that Warner Brothers? That's Warner Brothers, right?
Warner Brothers.
It's Warner Brothers.
Man.
You would have been able to tell if it was Disney because it would have been Disney princesses that the Looney Tunes were engaging with.
Yeah.
And maybe Marvel characters.
Big bummer.
Did you see the basketball games where they like an actual basketball game was happening, but they had the AR Marvel like storyline going on, like the two teams are playing, and then they had a storyline of like Marvel characters happening at the same time, and I hope somebody nuclears the world.
Wait, I'm confused. What
If
happened?
the FBI
Wait,
wasn't
what?
going to come after us before, they're definitely coming after us now.
The United States is cool with nuking things. It's just if you're going to destroy things within the United States.
We're not going to nuke the Disney company.
No, but like, I mean, if we said, "Oh, we have oil," they would 100% nuke us.
Oh my god,
That's true. Yeah, Knoxville, Tennessee would be
the
gone.
unfunded podcast cemetery. We have oil.
We have oil. We come and get it.
And on that note, we're gonna take a short. Yeah, we're gonna take a short break, and then
this was me trying to let you tease your Space Jam piece that's coming out on Monday.
No, we've talked a long time. Space Jam 2, Cemetery.com, Monday. This is my fucked up. Look at my fucked up finger. Cut it.
What? I want to see. What?
Ugh.
Oh, what happened?
Was that in Space Jam 2?
Yeah.
Space Jam 2 did this to me.
For people only listening, Zach's finger now has like a small alien creature crawling out from the
No, it's just blood. I cut it.
It's a little frightening. I didn't know this was humanly possible, but here
I
on
just
camera,
sliced
I
it
can see
open.
it.
I didn't go to
And
the
you
hospital.
Sadly, you cannot see it if you're only listening.
Yeah, that's why Patreon exclusive. You can watch it live and watch my fucked up finger. And in the break, we're talking Mad Chin in uniform. After this, Made Chin in uniform. After this.
Well, what a part one.
That is a long part one.
It's long, and part two is like over an hour.
Wow.
I think.
Shit.
The feature length cemetery.
This is the cemetery episode that's as long as The Empty Man.
Oh, I'm an empty man. I'm sorry.
I'm an empty man.
Wearing headphones, they hurt my ears so bad. Well,
I wish somebody had seen. I wish somebody here had seen. I think you should leave. I wish Jessica was here and I could make a reference to the prank show.
We should watch it. Heard it's great.
Which episode is this?
361.
361.
Cute.
What are you doing, fluffy guy? No, I was cutting cabbage and then I just sliced my fucking finger open.
Oh no.
Dang.
And I was like, is it enough that I need to go to the emergency room? And I was like, nah. And so I just made it work.
I did that once. I had to get stitches in my thumb.
I thought about it. I elected not to. Oh, we're still on live. See you guys.